Professor. Thank you very much for being with us. It's a pleasure and honor. To say the truth, I have taken dozens of interviews with different persons, but during my life, but I have a problem with you. And the problem is that you were during your life so busy with the very different, diverse crises which are somehow tearing our world even now, from Venezuela and this military threats against the Caribbean, to the war in Ukraine with the inherent risk of a nuclear disaster, to the genocide of Palestinians. I hope this is not the foundation of a new totalitarianism, to the ethnic cleansing of Nagorno-Karabakh. So for me as a journalist, the problem is where to begin and where to end. I will...
Begin with our world constitution, the United Nations Charter, and if the United States, United Kingdom, France, Germany would respect the UN Charter, we would not be in the messy situation we find ourselves today. And you didn't mention my interest in Greece. You didn't mention my interest in the genocide of the Ottoman Greeks, the Greeks of Pontus, the Greeks of Smyrna. I've written several articles on that. And here, the Cyprus Yearbook of International Relations. Here, the study we did back in 2005 as an alternative to the Annan plan, which actually had nothing to do with Kofi Annan. It was something that the Brits cooked up together with Alvaro de Soto, the special advisor. And unfortunately, it gave Kofi Annan a bad name because it was such a betrayal of all of the United Nations resolutions on Cyprus that it was scandalous that Kofi Annan would even lend his name to it. And it is to the credit of the Cypriot Greeks that they rejected it by 76%. I remember I was professor at the Graduate Institute here of the University of Geneva at the time, and I actually bet with my students. I said, this is a no-brainer. This is a non-starter, this Annan plan. And they made a major mistake by putting this to popular vote because it's, of course, going to be rejected. But I said it's going to be rejected by 65%. And I lost the bet because it was rejected by 76% of the population. And I say, bravo, Cypriots, because this was really a fraud and a betrayal of all United Nations General Assembly resolutions, Security Council resolutions. And that reminds me of Palestine. We had hundreds of resolutions adopted by the General Assembly and the Security Council that have been violated shamelessly by Israel and the United States over a very long period. And now Trump comes with a so-called peace plan, which is not at all a peace plan. He comes up with an ultimatum against the Palestinians, against Hamas, which totally ignores three advisory opinions of the International Court of Justice, which ignores UN resolutions like Resolution 242 of the Security Council that already back in 1967 ordered Israel to withdraw from the occupied territories, etc., etc. So this is a dictate of Mr. Trump to the world that this is the way he wants to see the Middle East. Well, I want to see Netanyahu in The Hague facing trial for genocide and nothing less. I mean, it's totally impossible to have any treaty or any peace signed by someone who is under an arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court. But you see, the same as the Annan plan had betrayed the Greek Cypriots, the Trump plan in Palestine has betrayed the Palestinians. And I welcome the exchange of detainees, hostages. I welcome the partial ceasefire, but the starvation of the Gaza population continues, and the genocide has not stopped. So I am not at all happy with this, notwithstanding all the propaganda that we get in the mainstream media. I recommend to your viewers this book by the late Professor Francis Boyle, was a good friend of mine, and he passed away in January this year. And he was a great expert for Palestine and Gaza. I also want to recommend another book, the book by Professor.
Can you bring it a little bit closer to the screen?
Yes, let's see whether you can read it, because it has to be Palestine.
Palestinians and International Law by Francis Boyle.
Yes. I also want to recommend this book by Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappé, Gaza in Crisis. I also want to recommend what could have been possible, this book by Jimmy Carter, Palestine Peace, Not Apartheid. I knew personally Jimmy Carter. I had the opportunity of discussing this book with him. And also his book, We Can Have Peace in the Holy Land. I mean,
but Professor, I would like to ask you, if you were discussing these problems with Jimmy Carter, what the late president did say about the influence of the Israeli lobby in the United States?
Well, that is the crux of the matter. The United States is no longer a democracy.
The United States.
The United States is pretty much an oligarchy, and this oligarchy is under the influence of the America-Israel Public Affairs Committee, the AIPAC. But there's also the B'nai Brit. There's also there's so many Jewish organizations that blackmail politicians and have brought any number of congressmen and senators to fall if they don't support Israel. Now, I consider that a large percentage of our senators and our congressmen and congresswomen are betraying the trust of their electors. They are betraying the U.S. Constitution. They are giving aid and comfort to a foreign state. They are putting the interests of Israel ahead of the interests of the American people. Nothing has damaged the United States more than this so-called alliance with a country that commits war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and this is happening in our name. I mean, I have written as much as I could against this genocide. I have called it genocide from day one. But the fact is that my point of view, that of Richard Falk, that of Jeffrey Sachs, that of Stephen Kinzer, are being ignored. We are not in power. We are not ministers. We have no direct influence on government. And no matter how good the analysis is that we and our colleagues have done on the crimes committed by Israel since 1945, because let's not forget, Zionism is a European project. It is a colonial project to settle this part of the Arab world and to realize something completely anachronistic, being the reestablishment of a racist theocracy in the middle of the Arab world, of the Muslim world. This is super dangerous, and the crimes committed by Israeli settlers, Zionist settlers, since 1945 are all well documented, to the point that you could easily say, without fear of being contradicted, that Israel was born in terrorism. Terrorism against the Palestinians, but also terrorism against the Brits. People seem to forget that a Zionist terrorist group blew up the King David Hotel in 1946, killing about 100 Brits, that any number of terrorist attacks were committed against Brits, against Christians, against Muslims in 1946-47, and that in 1948, the United Nations sent its envoy to Israel, Count Folke Bernadotte from Sweden.
And they assassinated him also.
By a Zionist terrorist group. Same type of fanaticism as killed the Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. We probably would have peace in the Middle East if Rabin had not been assassinated. But again, we tolerate this kind of terrorism, and we reverse the roles, and we call the Palestinians terrorists when the Palestinians are defending themselves from an illegal occupier. The International Court of Justice has been very clear.
Professor, they will tell you, I need also to bring the arguments of the other side, because they will tell you that Hamas is a terrorist organization, a theocratic organization, and has killed many Israelis on October 9th. What is your answer to this?
Well, as you well know, many investigative journalists have gone into the issue of what happened actually on the 7th of October 2023. Among them, you have Max Blumenthal, and I can send you the link to a 42-minute program that he aired year and a half ago, showing that a great many of the victims, the Israeli victims, were actually killed by Israeli action. As you know, the IDF used massive force against not only the Hamas, but against the Israelis themselves. And there is the so-called Hannibal doctrine, according to which uh, the Israeli military will actually kill Israelis so that they do not become hostages. It's a very fanatical, a very terroristic approach to politics. As far as the war crimes committed by some Hamas leaders, well, every war crime should be investigated, and those responsible should be prosecuted and punished. But we do need a thorough investigation because it has come out that many of the crimes attributed to Hamas never occurred. The idea of cooking babies in ovens, that reminds you of some of the inventions of propaganda in the First World War when they accused German soldiers in Belgium of chopping off the hands of children. Things like that never happened.
No, I think it was a psychological operation to try to associate in the subconscious what has happened in the German and Nazi camps with what Hamas is doing. And by the way, Professor, excuse me, but after all national liberation movements I know they do things which in normal conditions would be condemnable. For instance, I remember Algerian fighters who made bombs explode. There's not always, when you don't let a population any other means to resist, sometimes it has to.
Well, Article 7 of General Assembly Resolution 3314 specifically enables and legitimizes resistance on the part of a population under illegal occupation, which is the case of Hamas, which is the case of the Gaza population. So they have a right in international law to rebel and to repel the siege around Gaza and the occupation. Now, let's remember that since 2007, Israel has an illegal siege of Gaza, that Israel has the responsibility for the deaths of countless Palestinians as a result of this siege that caused a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. I'll give you an example. In 1943, in May, you had the Warsaw Ghetto. You had Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto who rebelled against the Nazis and tried to lift the siege. It was a heroic battle on the part of the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto. And no doubt they had a right to resist Nazi occupation. Similarly, the Gaza population, the Hamas leaders had a right to rebel against this illegal siege. And it's quite clear that the victims in 1943 were the Jews, and the victims in 2023 were the Palestinians, not the Israelis. And it's been very clearly stated by 4 United Nations Special Rapporteurs on Palestine: John Dugard, Richard Falk, Michael Link, and Francesca Albanese that because the occupation is illegal, it is the Palestinians under occupation that have a right in international law to resist. And Israel, as an illegal occupier, does not have a right of self-defense. I repeat that. The whole argument that Israel has a right of self-defense is worthless, has no merit in international law. What is important to remember is that Article 7 of General Assembly Resolution 3314 gives the Palestinians this right to resist the illegal occupation. And it's been said clearly by Francesca Albanese in several of her reports. It's been confirmed by the former High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, in her report submitted to the Human Rights Council this September. It's quite clear that Israel cannot invoke Article 51 of the UN Charter or refer to a right of self-defense. But we have a great problem in the mainstream media that is largely under the influence of AIPAC, that is largely under the influence of various Jewish lobbies, not only one Jewish lobby, various.
And not only in the United States, in many countries of the world, in most countries of the world, I would say.
Well,
A superpower, undeclared superpower.
That's not the case in China or in India or in many countries in Africa and Asia. But it is a problem in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, in most countries in Europe, that the mainstream media lies to you systematically. And the narrative that you get from the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, CNN, BBC, the Times, Le Monde, Le Figaro, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, Die Zeit, Der Spiegel, etc. These are all skewed narratives, fraught with lies and with suppression of evidence, because you don't hear much about the debunking of the ridiculous claims made by Israel, this cheap propaganda with regard to the 7th of October 2023. Much of what people believe didn't happen. And that which did happen are classical war crimes, which can very easily be investigated, and those held responsible for those crimes should be tried, prosecuted, and punished. But we are fighting a difficult battle where if we do not win the information war, because that is the main problem. We have a mainstream media that brainwashes the population, thereby annulling our fantasy that we decide that we are a democracy, that we can make a difference. I mean, if we are indoctrinated into believing that Israel is the good guy and the Palestinians are the terrorists, the bad guys, well, it's going to be very difficult to change this situation. But same as we are subjected to brainwashing and false narratives in the Israeli context, we are subjected to something very similar with regard to Ukraine and Russia. Without a doubt, the Ukraine war was provoked by NATO. I mean, you have a consistent pattern of breaking agreements, breaking commitments not to expand NATO eastwards. I mean, it's ridiculous for Russia unilaterally to have withdrawn from Central and Eastern Europe, to have dismantled the Warsaw Pact, allowing then NATO, instead of being dismantled in 1991, NATO to grow and to expand and to become an existential menace to the national security of Russia. That is the source of the problem. But if it had only been that, I mean, we got involved in the coup d'etat, a vulgar putsch against the democratically elected president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych. We installed our puppets in Kiev, and this unconstitutional illegal parliament started adopting Russophobic legislation against Ukrainians of Russian origin. That's why it's not at all surprising that after the illegal putsch in Maidan in Kiev in 2014 in February, that the majority Russian population in Crimea decided we're not recognizing this illegal government in Kiev. They organized a referendum. They invited the United Nations, OSCE, the EU to come and monitor. Of course, they didn't come to monitor. They just said they don't recognize the referendum. They held the referendum, followed by a decision, unilateral declaration of independence, not unlike the unilateral declaration of independence of Kosovo from Yugoslavia, followed by an official request to the Russian Federation to be reincorporated into Russia, followed by a decision of the Duma, of the parliament, that it was legal and it would be approved, followed by an examination by the Constitutional Court of the Russian Federation. And only then was it signed by Vladimir Putin.
Anyway,
So we're not dealing here with an annexation. Annexation
the very inclusion of those territories of Crimea and Donbass in the independent Ukraine in the rather doubtful from a legal and political point of view.
And the fault is with the United Nations, because when Ukraine unilaterally splits from the Soviet Union, at that moment, the United Nations should have said, if the piece can separate from the whole, a piece of the piece can separate from the piece.
But this is what you say. It was a clause in the late Soviet constitution. Simply, Boris Yeltsin did not want to apply it. On the contrary, he wanted himself to dissolve the Soviet Union. This was what you proposed for the United Nations. There was already in the Soviet constitution, because, and this would have avoided a lot of problems which appeared also in Yugoslavia. For instance, if Azerbaijan goes out of the USSR, why the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh have to stay with Azerbaijan? If Georgia goes out of the Soviet Union, why Abkhazians and Ossetians have to stay with Georgia, and so on and so forth. All those wars in both Soviet Union and Yugoslavia happened because of that, of the non-respect of the right of peoples to self-determination.
I wrote a report for the General Assembly in my function as independent expert on international order, dedicated to the theory and practice of self-determination. And I made it very clear that many wars since 1945 had their origin in the unjust denial of the right of self-determination and on the uneven application of this human right to self-determination, which, by the way, is anchored in Articles 1 and 55, in chapters 11 and 12 of the UN Charter, enshrined in Article 1 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. It is jus cogens, meaning peremptory international law, but it's being applied arbitrarily. It's being applied a la carte. Today, we allow Croatia to split from Yugoslavia, but we don't want to allow the
Krajina.
Republika Srpska to split from Bosnia and Herzegovina. It doesn't make any sense at all. It is arbitrary. And of course, arbitrariness undermines the authority and the credibility of the institution and of law itself. If law is not being applied uniformly, then what good is it? And unfortunately, the mainstream media supports this fraud on the United Nations and fraud on the world. They call the peaceful reincorporation of Crimea into Russia, they call that an annexation. They even call it an illegal annexation. Annexation in international law means a military occupation of foreign territory against the will of the population concerned and without consultation of the population that is being simply formed by the country that did the military occupation. Example, classical example, the Golan Heights of Syria. The Golan Heights of Syria were illegally annexed by Israel, and it remains an illegal annexation. Totally different situation in Crimea that went peacefully, without war, without shedding any blood, with a referendum, with a parliamentary declaration of independence, with, I mean, step by step, is very obvious conformity with the rule of law, the rule of domestic law and the rule of international law. But of course, that doesn't fit the narrative that the mainstream media wants us to have. So they call it illegal. And as far as the Donbass is concerned, we had two treaties, Minsk I and Minsk II, which would have left the Donbass within the territorial integrity of Ukraine. So Ukraine's sovereignty over the Donbass would have remained if they had implemented and not shamelessly violated the Minsk agreements. But of course, the Minsk agreements were yet another farce because, as we know from Angela Merkel, I mean, the guarantors of the Minsk agreement were Angela Merkel for Germany and François Hollande for France. And Angela Merkel last year, in an interview, brazenly admitted that she and François Hollande had only entered into this agreement in order to gain time, so
You
that
believe them. You believe what they said.
Ukraine could be armed to the teeth. So, I mean, you enter into an international treaty, an agreement in such bad faith And I mean, what kind of a statesman is that? What kind of a statesman without any honor would admit that? But Angela Merkel has done it and is proud of it. It's absolutely surrealistic. So, if you read Sergei Lavrov's two draft treaties that were presented to the NATO leadership and to the United States for a security architecture for all of Europe, guaranteeing the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Ukraine, but also guaranteeing the neutrality of Ukraine and, of course, the national security of Russia. It is a treaty very well anchored in the UN Charter, very conform with traditional, customary international law. And what did Jens Stoltenberg, the then Secretary General of NATO, do? Dismissed it. I mean, they didn't want to discuss it. I mean, it was just throwing the gauntlet in front of Putin's face, and unfortunately, Putin picked it up. So, considering that the United States had established 12, I'm not kidding, 12 CIA bases on the frontier to Russia in Ukraine, and had opened 32 biolabs that were doing biological research for biological weapons. Russia realized that it was in existential danger. So, having tried everything to prevent a clash with the West, Putin decided on what was termed a limited military operation. And it would have, I mean, it was finally giving the message to Kiev, enough is enough. Now, I mean, we want security, and you will not enter NATO. Zelensky agrees. His negotiators agree in Istanbul in the negotiations. It was even paraffired.
You mean in February and March 2022?
22. And then what happens? Boris Johnson and the United States intervene and say, no, 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 no. You have to continue fighting. We will support you. We will defeat Russia. The idea was to weaken Russia so much that then the ulterior purpose of the whole thing, I don't know whether you're familiar with the two studies by the Rand Corporation. That's a think tank in the United States that works for the US government. The idea is essentially is to dismember Russia so that
But even Zbigniew Brzezinski has spoken of dismemberment of Russia in his book published, I think, in 1996, and
97.
they came to apply this. Of course, Brzezinski was quite smart, and I think before his death he understood that the window of possibility for doing this thing is over. But nowadays, the quality of Western leaders and strategists seems very, very low, and this is quite a risk, by the way.
No, no, I am quite concerned about the intransigence of Starmer, Macron, Merz, who want to continue this proxy war in perpetuum, thinking that through sanctions they will finally break Russia. And they're very wrong, because I know Russia I've been frequently in Russia. I speak Russian. I know the Russian culture, the Russian mentality. They're very patient. They're not emotional in that sense. Uh, they are concerned about their national security. That is their priority. They're willing to accept discomfort, to accept the sanctions against them, but will not change their core policy. And the result of this 19th package of sanctions, the result of these illegal, by the way, the sanctions are not sanctions. In international law, the only legal sanctions are those imposed by the Security Council under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. Everything else is the use of force prohibited in Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the Charter. And
So you mean the existing sanctions are illegal from the point of view of the international law?
Exactly. And they are not only illegal, you shouldn't use the term sanction because the term sanction almost implies that there's some legitimacy to them, that the country imposing these unilateral coercive measures is acting in conformity with international law. So this is again a psychological operation by the use of language. You call that sanctions when it's unilateral coercive measures which are illegal, and then you try to legitimize it in the eyes of the public. And as the case may be, the only result of this 19th package of unilateral coercive measures is that the war will be prolonged. And I expect that in the next weeks, Pokrovsk will fall, as well as several other major hubs in Ukraine. And they have lost a tremendous number of human beings. I mean, this is a meat grinder. And Ukraine keeps recruiting now, not even young people, they're recruiting people like you and me, elderly people into the army because they have no army left. They're being, shall we say, annihilated.
Excuse me, Professor. Why the West has to be interested? They are Slavs, Ukrainians, Russians. They will be killed. So the best.
Again, it's
There was the same was the Hitler's plan during the Second World War.
yeah, it has been said, we are willing to fight until the last Ukrainian. We put the weapons and you put the blood. Not only that, I mean, Trump has managed to make a contract, a deal with Zelensky to loot the natural resources of Ukraine. You don't forget that Ukraine is enormously indebted. Weapons cost billions of dollars. Planes, drones, missiles, Patriot systems, they cost millions. And where's the money? How can Ukraine ever pay it back? Answer, never. Ukraine will never be able to pay back except through the looting of its natural resources. So it's a win-win situation for the United States. And it is, by the way, a lose-lose proposition for the Europeans. And I just do not understand the level of stupidity.
But I think the question of not permitting any kind of Europe-Russian rapprochement was always a strategic goal of the United States.
Well, the United States is still
during all
enamored.
the 20th century.
Yeah, I mean, we have a term for that in English, full spectrum dominance. Full spectrum dominance means we, as the hegemon, the only hegemon in a unipolar world, want to make sure that there are no competitors. And we want to essentially exploit the entire world. We want to loot the world, which the United States has been doing also partly through the dollar. And my hope, I see the only hope in the global South and in the new organizations such as BRICS, such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, such as the Belt and Road Initiative, that the global majority would finally stop the madness of the United States. My fear, of course, is that the United States has become so disconnected from reality that they may actually consider a preemptive strike against Russia. And I keep saying there's
China.
or China. The thing is that no one will ever win an atomic war. We're all going to lose. And coming back to the idea of a preemptive strike, of course, we know where the silos are. We know where the big missiles are. But these days, you don't need these big missiles. The oceans are alive with submarines, and these submarines are all equipped with nuclear weapons. So that Russian submarines, Chinese submarines, can go next to Los Angeles, next to San Francisco, next to New York and Washington, and shoot from a few kilometers away. And there's no way you can annul the entire nuclear arsenal of the Russians, of the Chinese, and let's not forget the North Koreans. If there is a nuclear confrontation between East and West, there's no doubt that North Korea will get involved, because North Korea will understand that it would be next. So North Korea would be on the side of Russia and on the side of China. And who's going to be annihilated? Japan and Okinawa and Hawaii and the United States. And of course, then humanity and civilization will go down the drain. But we have.
And you did not include also the possibility of using all other sort of technologies which are we are developing now, bioweapons, information technology, cyber attacks. There is such a technology. If really the two camps use everything they have, it will be just a matter of probably of hours or days at the end of civilization.
In my book, Building
A Just World Order.
World Order, I outline 25 principles of international order that, if they were observed, we would have preventive diplomacy and we would escape many of the conflicts that we are suffering today. Now, my 14 reports to the General Assembly and to the Security Council, and actually, I spoke before the Security Council on the issue of unilateral coercive measures, was last year. It was a very good talk that I gave at the Security Council. But in any event, Uh, I'm not the only one who's been saying these things. Jeffrey Sachs says the same thing. John Mearsheimer, Richard Falk. And unfortunately, we are not anywhere close to the levers of power. So I have no influence on my senators in the United States and no influence on my congresswoman, although I always send them my writings. But of course, I never get any response. The other book that I wanted to show you is The Human Rights Industry, Clarity Press, Atlanta, Georgia. What's important is the penetration of human rights institutions and also of United Nations institutions, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, etc. They're so penetrated by the CIA, by the MI6, by the Mossad, etc. The secretariats of these bodies, I used to be for decades a senior lawyer with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. The CIA tried to recruit me not once, but twice as a mole. I told them to go and jump in Geneva Lake. But the fact is that there are many moles in the organizations. And the fact is that the recruitment policies of the United Nations guarantees that the Secretariat is ideologically closer to Washington and Brussels.
In which way it guarantees that?
I assure you that today, a person who speaks like I do would never, never be hired. I would be eliminated in the first interview. And the same thing, that's why I don't aspire to any other United Nations post. I would be interested in the post of independent expert on international order, which is the post that I had before, or special rapporteur on minorities, or special rapporteur on self-determination, or something like that. But forget it. I would be eliminated in the first interview.
But
They
excuse me,
don't
Professor.
want to have someone like me.
Russia and China are permanent members of the Security Council. Why they let the West dominate in such a way the organization?
Well, that is a very good question. I have posed that question to the Chinese ambassador here in Geneva and to the Russian ambassador here in Geneva. And they say all the decisions are taken in the capital. And that is it. For whatever reason, neither Putin nor he are prepared to put their foot down and to say enough is enough. We're not going to tolerate a secretariat that is ideologically against us. I don't know why they don't push back. As I said, I am now no longer interested in any United Nations appointment. I'm glad that I'm retired. I only maintain my position as professor of law. And matter of fact, I was teaching this afternoon just before this interview. I enjoy teaching, but to occupy another position in the United Nations is an illusion, because I will not be able to go through the interview filter. They don't want people who think independently. They want people who will toe the line.
So, dear professor, you are describing a world which is far away from the democratic ideas which prevailed at the end of the Second World War, and also from the humanistic principles and this kind of equilibrium between labor and capital, which was characteristic of Western societies after 1945. Uh, in essence, one sees is the rise of a new totalitarianism. Because if somebody can of course, you remember the definition of Carl Schmitt about the dictator. He's the guy who can decide not to apply the law, not to apply the rules. And we have the West,
Romans call that
which wants to impose its will to the whole humanity, and we have also Israel and a great part of the financial capital which wants to impose its will even in Western countries. So we are going towards a totalitarian situation, I think.
I hate to tell you, we're already there.
We are
We're already
already
there.
there.
I tell my students uh, it is worse than 1984, George Orwell's 1984. We are in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, and it happened gradually. If you read Brave New World, you see that it is not so brazen. It's not a ministry of truth and a ministry of peace and a ministry of love. No, 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 no. It just goes very slowly until there's total control by the government and people are kept happy. I mean, we are distracted with sports, juvenalis panem et circenses, bread and circuit games. We are distracted with ancillary matters. But that which is important, whether it be the economy or whether it be peace and war, that is for a very select group of people, of
And
oligarchs.
a diminishing one also, because
Yeah, yeah, would decide everything for the rest of us. And no matter how high you have been in the UN system, what positions you have occupied, it doesn't matter. We are expendable. We are no longer important. You only have these characters like Trump or Macron or Merz that are not at all democratically legitimized, but they are in power. They're dictators. And it's going to be very difficult to push back against that. I mean, as I said, my hope lies in the third world, in the global south, in African and Asian countries that finally say, we've had enough of you guys and we want out. Now,
this is in a way this is happening because we see that, for instance, China is now a huge economic power. Russia has returned as an international power, which was not in the 1990s.
Brazil,
India, Latin America. But you know, sir, we have a problem because the West has so much force that it cannot maybe dominate the world, but it can destroy the world, as you have said previously.
we
And
are going in that direction because of intransigence. We need what Zhu Xi, the Chinese philosopher, had written about in The Art of War. We need golden bridges for our adversaries so that they can retreat without losing too much face. I mean, I would like to build golden bridges for Macron and for Merz and for Starmer and for Trump so that they could turn the page and say, well, this didn't happen. It's like with the United States in Vietnam in 1975 or the United States in Afghanistan in when was it, 2022, that the United States withdrew from Afghanistan. We were solidly defeated in both cases, but we just turned the page like if nothing had happened. And that's what I would like to see in the context of Ukraine. It's interesting. Putin has never, neither Putin nor the Russian press has never tried to humiliate Trump or Macron or Starmer or Merz. He always deals with the West with a degree of respect, with a degree of honor. He doesn't want to humiliate them because a humiliated person is wounded, and an emotional wound is
Yes.
very difficult to overcome or to heal. So he doesn't want to make the mistake to force the opponent into a choice of a humiliating retreat or pushing the button
You
on
know,
nuclear weapons.
sir, I'm afraid that there is an extremist party quite powerful in the West and in Israel, which I consider the leading force in the West, which exactly for this reason, not to let political leaders have a way back. It is demolishing the bridges. It creates situations where it is only victory or defeat. For
That
instance,
is that is the great dilemma. We thought that Trump was going to be meeting Putin in Budapest, and there was a real hope for peace there. And this was torpedoed by Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO. It was torpedoed by Starmer and Macron and Merz. This is extremely dangerous because whether we like it or not, Russia has more nuclear weapons than we do, and Russia has much better missiles than we do. They have hypersonic missiles, they have the Oreshniks, etc., and they can annihilate us. But Putin doesn't want to annihilate the West. Putin just wants to have his national security respected. And
yes,
we
but
are,
I'm not sure that Macron, Merz, and Rutte have the power to oblige Trump to do one thing or another. I'm afraid that there are other forces which we cannot very easily locate and which are running now the Western system.
on the other hand, as I said, I don't completely give up hope that the United Nations can play a positive role here. Uh, Depends who the next Secretary General will be. I'm putting my hope on the Mexican former uh,
President.
minister. It's a woman, Barcelona,
Mhm.
or possibly the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley. She would be fantastic. But of course, I doubt very much that we'll get it. It is actually the turn for Latin America and the Caribbean. There's another candidate there, which is my former High Commissioner, Michelle Bachelet, whom I respect very much. But Michelle Bachelet is already old and tired. And this is a job that requires a young person with a lot of energy. So I don't think Michelle Bachelet would be the right choice for Secretary General. If the organization is reformed and in particular the Security Council is reformed, there is a hope that matters might improve. There's a very good book by Professor Richard Falk on the reform of the Security Council. I myself have very concrete proposals in this book, in the human rights. No, I'm sorry, in the building a just world order. I'm looking here. Here's the book by Richard Falk.
Bring it a little bit closer, please.
Richard Falk and
Liberating the United Nations.
Yeah, and Hans von Sponek. It's a book that is worth getting. But again, we are not going to continue trying to solve all the problems of the world. I do want to mention one other problem. My heart is close to the Armenians and it's close to the Greeks. I want to have some solution for the population of Nagorno-Karabakh, of the Artsakh Republic. I have been in Yerevan. I've spoken in Yerevan at the universities, and I think that they've been very unlucky to have Mr. Pashinyan as their leader. I think
yes.
He has betrayed the interests of the Armenians at large and betrayed the interests of Nagorno-Karabakh. Certainly, these people have the right of self-determination. Certainly, these people, survivors of the Armenian genocide of 1915 to 1923, should be seen as entitled to self-determination. And there are many other peoples who should have self-determination, certainly the Palestinians. And if we don't get a two-state solution, then here is the other option.
Yes.
This Virginia Tilley's very clever book, The One-State Solution. Well, if we have a one-state solution and we implement General Assembly Resolution 193 of 194, sorry, of 1948, the right to return of the Palestinians to their homeland, then you're going to have a majority on the part of the Palestinians. And if Israel is a state member of the United Nations, well, it will have to abide. This one state, this one single state, will have to abide by the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Convention against racial discrimination and all the other United Nations conventions that guarantee the rights of equality, the rights of the Palestinians. So what I do not see as a possibility is to have any kind of state that is headed by a genocidal killer, that is headed by someone who bears a responsibility for the genocide that has been committed against the Palestinians. So Netanyahu must go, period. Similarly, I don't think that it is possible to have peace in Ukraine for as long as Mr. Zelensky is there. Zelensky is the problem. He's not the solution. And I would like to see free democratic elections in Ukraine and I am quite persuaded that Zelensky would not be reelected. But we're not there yet. We are in a situation of constant escalation, what the Germans called Flucht nach vorn. The French call it fuite en avant. When you find yourself against the wall, you jump forward, you know, and you double down on your maximalist demand.
I hope we will not reach the, a great anthropologist. I think it was Claude Lévi-Strauss, has said that he discovered some races which, when they were they were in front of problems they could not solve, they committed collective suicide. I want to ask you one last question because I already abused your time. What about what is your appreciation of Trump's policy up to now? Because I think many people have believed, have had a lot of illusions about him worldwide and in the United States. And I'm wondering what is your appraisal of his policy? Is really a peaceman or he's just playing theater with people outside and inside the United States?
Theater is a good term for it. I wouldn't call it choreography. I don't think it's very good at choreography. But theater, yes, it is theater of the absurd. I did not vote Trump, and I certainly did not vote Kamala Harris. This was a choice between bad and worse, between smallpox and cholera. And I voted for an independent, or rather a green candidate, a woman, a medical doctor called Dr. Jill Stein. She didn't even get 1%. But at least I didn't want to blame myself for co-responsibility in having such a madman in the White House. He's a dangerous man. He is nothing. He has like zero sense of diplomacy and zero statecraft. He is a bully. And he wants to make America great again. Wrong. To make America respected again, which is not worldwide. That will really be something. To make America liked, maybe. That would be something to strive for. But if you want to make America true and genuine and humanistic, I would say revive the legacy of Eleanor Roosevelt and revive the spirituality of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That would be the key to reviving the United States as a country that can still do some good for the world, not a bully that threatens and blackmails other countries. And myself, I'm an American citizen, but I'm also a Swiss citizen. I'm very happy not to live in the United States and not to be subjected to the indignities, the daily indignities of what Donald Trump is doing to Americans and is doing to the country. This is long-term damage. I mean, I go back to my enthusiasm for a man like Jimmy Carter who was a good Christian and who had values. I mean, Jimmy Carter was not an oligarch, and he was not a billionaire, never expected or never aspired.
But Professor, we have a very radical and quick change in the ethos of the ruling class and of the political personnel, if I judge from what I read about Epstein. I mean, this situation, it reminds the darkest periods of the Roman Empire.
Well, indeed. I mean, and a lot of people are being blackmailed. I'm quite sure that most politicians that are doing these mad things have skeletons in the closet. The Mossad knows those skeletons in the closet. So does the M16 and the CIA. So people say, if you don't do what we want you to do, we will spill the beans.
And you have forgotten Benjamin Netanyahu also.
I mean, it is.
He seems to control every move by President Trump.
Yeah.
I don't
mean,
know how he's doing it, but he's doing it.
Yeah. It is not the dog wagging the tail, but the tail wagging the dog. It is. It is shocking. As I say, I am happy to live in Geneva, Switzerland, to be a Swiss citizen and to participate in public life in Switzerland, where at least a residue of normalcy exists, a residue of rationality persists. But I don't give up. I'm a practicing Catholic, and I think that as a Christian, we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to the world and we owe it to our religion to remain optimists, to strive always to improve things. If you are familiar with Goethe's Faust and the second part of Goethe's Faust, the chorus sings a line that I like very much. Notwithstanding all the mistakes and all the bad things that Faust has done in part one of this tragedy, the chorus sings, wer immer strebend sich bemüht, den können wir erlösen. Whoever has strived always for the good, we can still save him, notwithstanding all his sins. And I thought that gives me a certain hope and a certain encouragement to continue striving. Whether I'm successful in my lifetime or not, at least I want to continue striving. And I want to tell the people of Athens to continue striving for democracy. I want to speak to those who are descendants of the genocide against the Greeks of Pontus and the Greeks of Smyrna to continue talking about the genocide committed against them. You should not just simply erase history, should not fall into what the term the Romans used to call damnatio memoriae, the erasure.
Anyway, you know, in Greek, aletheia, truth, means no, not to forget. I mean, not to forget the important and...
Identity is memory. Existence is memory. Being is memory. So you have to keep it alive to know who you are and where you come from. And I have my appeal also to my dear friends in Cyprus. As I say, I think that one day this illegal occupation of northern Cyprus will end. And I regret very much that Prime Minister Ecevit was never tried and prosecuted for the war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in northern Cyprus and the expulsion of 200,000 Greek Cypriots by the Turkish forces in 1974.
But unfortunately, Professor, our leaders in both Greece and Cyprus would prefer to forget all history, and they are ready to get back to this Annan plan you have studied and you have condemned in the most severe terms.
Well, I have a certain hope. I have a good friend who happens to be my successor as UN independent expert on international order. And he's the former foreign minister of Greece, Georgios Katrougalos.
Mm-hmm.
He is fantastic. He is really first rate. That is a UN independent expert who means it and who has done excellent reports and has put out excellent press releases. So it's not all lost. There are good people in the system. I can name Professor Alena Dohan, the rapporteur on international, on unilateral coercive measures. For instance, this is a book by Alena Dohan.
Mm-hmm.
I have a chapter in this book. In any event, Sanctions, Business, and Human Rights is an important book. And there is the rapporteur on minorities, Professor Nicolas Lebras, a colleague from the University of Geneva. I very much like him. And there are people that you can still admire. But as everything human, there are also others whom we like less. And on this happy note, I think I will rejoin my wife, who you didn't see it, but she opened my office and said, dinner.
Okay, so I must thank her also for letting you so much time with us, and I hope we will have in the future another opportunity to say more things because you are really a source of extremely interesting ideas and expertise on nearly all aspects of international life. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you too. It'll be my pleasure to come again.
Bye bye.
And a good evening to you.
Thank you.
Bye.